to the much more brilliant minds next to me. But in this, I don't, this film is inspired by parent trigger, but it represents a story that's a little bit different.
Yes.
Because the parent trigger laws basically say that, you know, if you get together more than 50% of your parents, then they can take over a school and determine what was going to happen to it. And I created a fictional law, because I live in my little filmmaker utopia, in which you had to have 50% of the parents and 50% of the teachers.
Right.
And all of them had to come together in order to transform the school. So I just wanted to draw that distinction, because it's a little bit different than the way that the parent trigger laws are actually functioning. In terms of the success of them, I'm going to...
And one point, but we're seeing them passed in all these states around the country, and in California, where they're probably further along than anybody else in terms of the court battle, they still have not succeeded in taking over the school.
It shows you how entrenched this problem is, though, because right now there is a battle going on in California around one of the schools, and so what happened was the parents gathered the signatures. They got way more than 51% of the vote. They turned them in. The school districts did the same sorts of tactics, tried to get the signatures revoked, etc. It went to court, and the judge upheld the signatures and said you now must move forward in the plan that the parents voted on, which was turning that school into a charter school. What the school district yesterday voted on was that they would in fact implement a plan, but it wasn't going to be the plan that the parents wanted. They were going to implement their own plan for how the district was going to turn around the school, which is totally against the way that the law is actually written. And so now the parent revolution people are saying they're going to have to go back to court again. So it is this, and you realize that the unions have this bottomless war chest, so they can keep going to court forever and ever and ever and paying the legal fees. The parents, on the other hand, don't have those kinds of resources, and sometimes the way this happens is they just beat it out of you. I mean, they just drag it on so long that it really saps the desire out of everyone.
Well, I think the answer is that there is no one answer. That's the answer. The answer is the parent trigger bill is a tool to empower the powerless. And that used to be a noble American tradition that I think is a healthy one. But if a parent had the power to send their kids, irrespective of what the monopoly says, to a charter school of their choice or to a private school of their choice, that's about as empowering as empowerment gets. So we're all in on the parent trigger bill just because I think it's a symbol of what's necessary, which is empowering parents to engage and make important choices for their kids. But ultimately, we need to move to a system like what Bobby Jindal has just done in Louisiana, where New Orleans is going to be, already is a majority kind of alternative public school district. There are more charter school students, I think, than traditional school students, and the voucher program is going to grow dramatically. Similarly, in Florida, Indiana, other places, I think the more choices you give parents, the better all schools do. The best example I heard recently was Milwaukee, which has had the longest standing voucher program in the country, and they have a very good charter school set of schools in Milwaukee. A majority of the kids now in Milwaukee go to one of those two alternatives. The union there, recognizing that they had to compete now because parents had an abundance of choices, have changed their compensation system. They're agreeing to move to a system where they're paid for performance in different fashions. They're voluntarily giving up collective bargaining rights that they have earned over a generation of time and moving to a system that will assure that there'll be a greater chance for students to learn. And they're encouraging the school district then to market that to students. Now that's about as empowering as you can get, to create a marketplace where parents can say, hey, I got 3 really good choices. All of them are better than they were 5 years ago. Ultimately, the parent trigger can help in getting there, but that's what we need. And thankfully it's starting to happen. It's, as I said, it's been a pretty interesting last 3 or 4 years.
So let me bring up another kumbaya moment. We've been talking about how bipartisan all of this is, but we are 2 months from a presidential election. Is it really And are we hearing education talked about enough during this campaign? How is it playing out in the politics of what's happening in this moment? We're at a convention. And what does that mean for the long term?
Well, I don't know how many speeches are going to be at the convention. There'll be one that'll be about education. I think generally education is a local and state-driven issue. The federal government can be a partner. I don't think the disagreements that exist between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama on education are nearly as deep and wide as they are on tax policy or defense policy, perhaps, or the budget, or regulation, or a lot of things. So this is not quite a Switzerland, I wouldn't think, but it's because it's something of national purpose. I don't think anybody suggests that the federal government will have a takeover of all of this. It's a secondary issue, I think. But ultimately, if we don't get this right, you can't get everything else. You can play like you get the rest of it right, but we collapse under our own weight if we don't educate the next generation to be competitive. So I'm hopeful it'll be something of national purpose. I just don't think there's a 5-point plan from Washington that will solve it.
I think we are not talking about this issue nearly enough in this presidential election. And I think that's, it's actually really striking to think about why it's not. I mean, the most important issue at the top of everyone's minds right now is the economy and jobs. And the bottom line is that we will never regain our position in the global marketplace. America will never do that until we fix our public education system. All these other things, the bailouts, these are all short-term solutions. That we have to look at the longer ball, and we have to talk more about education and educating our workforce. And so I think it's unfortunate that the candidates are not talking more about it. And I would hope that we actually try to force this issue more. Hopefully, with your speech, it'll raise the issue more. But I think everyday people, like those of you out there, I mean, we need to send the message to the campaigns that this is what we want them to talk about. We want to hear about how they're going to address the education issues in the nation.
I'll say this will be very heretic, but I'm getting used to being heretical. Like the president, by picking Arnie Duncan, I think did a good thing for the country. Some of the incentives for the non-reform-minded states that or disincentives maybe, of changing behavior is credited, I think, to the president and Arnie Duncan. And Mitt Romney, I think, will be a very good president on education policy for one simple reason. He's been a governor. And he gets it because governors get this stuff. It's normally their #1 issue outside of economic development. So one of the reasons why it might not be as big an issue is that we're in this climate of negativity, and there may be more agreement here than people want to admit. In terms of the purpose of why it's important, I think people generally agree with that. So, you know, don't count on a big hearty debate. And 3 debates, my guess, I'll bet $2, not any large sum of money, $2, that it'll come up once.
To that end, and I just, I mean, there is something I think very practical that all of you can do to help. I mean, you know, one of the reasons that we created this film was to cast a light on this issue. And so what we need your help doing is getting people to go and see the movie, whether they agree with it or disagree with it. There's 140 characters less, and buy a ticket opening weekend is less than 140 characters.
You can buy more than one ticket, too. September 28th.
And how can they help by getting the message out specifically?
Well, I was going to say, you have a little pamphlet. Make sure you grab it that's on your seat. Hopefully you do. You may have tossed it aside when you sat down, but they're around, and it has very specific action items for what you can do upon leaving this movie. But you got to help get the word out about the movie. Get on your Twitter account.
Yeah.
At WBD movie, I think?
Yes, and if you liked the movie, you can help to shape the dialogue. I mean, you've had the opportunity to see it before a number of Americans, and what we're finding is that, you know, the defenders of the status quo are beginning to frame the debate about this movie, and we can only look to you to sort